Good evening, everybody, and firstly, a few words of thank you. Firstly, thank you to all the listeners out there for being here, taking your time out. Although we're not meeting in public, we are meeting in a virtual situation because of the pandemic. And I'd like to say a big thank you for everybody who's been observing the lockdown rules. And thank you everybody to those who submitted questions prior to the meeting. It's really great when we can actually get questions in advance, and we've had about, I think, 8 questions so far. There might be 1 or 2 that might have come in last minute, which we'll be told about. What we'll do is we'll answer the questions that were submitted first, and then we'll look at the Q&A chat that comes up on live chat. I'll come on to in a minute. The format of today's webinar is I'll just say a few words, and then what I'll do is I'll introduce my colleague, Councillor Gwen Law. She'll say a few words, and then my colleague, Councillor Yusra Hussain, she'll say a few words. And then we've got an update from our MP, Tracy Brabin. Tracy, thank you for very much for coming on live. I know you've got a very busy diary, and I know you've got another meeting at 7. So if we don't finish at 7, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out to join us. We've got Inspector Alan Travis and Sergeant Andrew Maloney from the West Yorkshire Police Naval Policing Team, who will also give us an update in terms of the situation that's taking place at the moment. And we've got Lee Hamilton, who's the Safer Communities Manager at Kirklees Council. You know, I really appreciate you all taking the time out to be here this evening. I don't need to say the obvious, but I think it's important that I do. Firstly, we have been through a massive shock. You know, the shock that we have been through in our communities is massive, and you know, the appalling murder that we've seen that has happened over the last weekend is horrendous. My thoughts are with the loved ones, the friends and family of the victim, because every single life is very precious, and to die under such tragic circumstances, you know, it shouldn't be happening in today's day and age. And it's a shocking event that has shaken everybody and every single community, not least my own ward in Batley West, and I have another responsibility as being the leader as well. And I thank everybody who's been talking to me and WhatsApping me and sending me emails. Safety is our primary concern. That is paramount. And you need to know what we are doing, because very often we end up in our establishments, the police do what they're doing, the council does what they're doing, and everybody carries on. But in times like this, we need to actually open up our doors, listen and reflect, and listen to what's going on. And we need to then address the concerns that you are going to be highlighting. That's why we've called this public webinar under extraordinary situations, because we are in extraordinary times. And one of the key things is we need to make sure that we work together, and to make sure that everybody pulls together and the communities are genuinely safer. But more than that, what I want to do is I really want to listen to everybody out there. We're here to listen. That's why we've taken the time out on a Friday evening. Your experiences, your concerns, and your ideas and your feedback is vitally important. So please make sure that you use the chat button, the Q&A, and once we go through the set questions that have been sent to us beforehand, we will then go on to the Q&A. And we have a moderator that will actually manage all that. Lee's going to be taking in charge of the Q&As that have come in. Anyway, basically, right, yeah, you know, it's something that it's always difficult, isn't it? You know, when on the back of something so traumatic, right? Yeah, we have to get together, but we have to actually make sure that we get this right. That's why it's a very important part of the meeting where you chip in, and most of the meeting will be actually focused on hearing your views and taking your questions and providing you guys with the reassurance. I genuinely want to hear your views. We genuinely are here to actually learn and listen and move forward. The police are fully committed to making sure that people feel safe, and we get measures in place to make sure that happen. We need to tackle the issues together, and make sure that, you know, we actually improve our surroundings, make sure we improve our communities, and make sure that it doesn't happen again. You know, because I don't want another murder, another loss of life anywhere in Kirklees. So what I'll do now is I'll just ask Gwen. Gwen, do you want to just say a few words, and then we'll go on to Yusra. Gwen, over to you.
Hiya, thanks Shabir for that, very eloquently put. Can I just say thank you as well to everybody for organising this meeting. Thank you, Shabir, to all you guys on the panel, obviously to the IT team. when I heard the news early on Monday morning of what had happened, not just in Batley, not just in my ward, but just actually around the corner from where I live, I was so shocked. And to hear just a 20-year-old man had very sadly lost his life. Obviously, my thoughts to his family and friends at this time. But obviously, we are here to listen to the community. So I'm not going to take much more time up. We are here to listen. We want to hear your concerns. And it is partnership working with ourselves as councillors, with Tracy, our MP, with the police and the council to help people in this area to try and get over this tragic incident. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gwen. Appreciate that. You want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Shabir. Firstly, thank you for providing such an informed introduction and for organising the meeting and for the team coming together and the IT team too. I mean, despite the lockdown rules, it's great to see that we're communicating over technology. As you've highlighted, it's allowed us to a good way to participate and allowed us to communicate with our community and for the community to raise their concerns to us as well. I just want to be very clear, the tragic loss of life, it's one too many. And my thoughts are also with the family and his friends. But I also want to make it clear there are some antisocial behaviour issues that were identified in Jessup Park during COVID lockdown. But I just also want to mention that was completely unrelated to the incident. But I'll let the police inform you more on that. And I also want to take the opportunity to mention that as a councillor, I'm very committed to working with you all as a community, listening to your concerns and representing your views. And I want to listen to what you have to say, but most importantly, want to work together to achieve a positive way forward. Thank you.
I can't hear you, Shabir, so...
Shabir, you're muted.
There we go.
Sorry about that. We're muting so that we don't get feedback. Thank you, Yusra, for that. Tracy, you want to introduce yourself and make sure, no doubt that people know you, but it's always good to do an introduction and tell us the work that you've been doing on the back of the knife crime stuff, which I know that you've been doing some excellent work, and please update us. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the invitation to join you this evening, and thank you, Shabir, for the opening words and also the work that these brilliant councillors are doing locally. I mean, we just can't get away from the fact that Bradley was 20 and he had his life ahead of him, and the impact is obviously not just his family, but his friends, our community, neighbours. It has a massive impact on our community when something like this happens, and absolutely heartbreaking that the loss of life is just so instant with a knife, and you carry a knife, you're more likely to use it. So I've been raising this issue in the House of Commons. We haven't had a debate on knife crime in over a year in Parliament, when it's such a massive issue, and it's actually the highest numbers of incidences and offences with a knife and a blade in 2018 to 2020 since records began. So it is a really important issue across the country, and something that I am absolutely committed to working with partners to resolve. Because let's not forget, there was also the murder of the Birstall man, whose name is Robert Wilson from Birstall, who was killed in Huddersfield with a knife. And the two people who are currently in court and have changed their plea today, is my understanding, they're teenagers. What's going wrong in our society that teenagers are taking out a blade and using it on innocent people and doing their job, and also on other young people? So I've written an open letter to the community to say I'm going to make it my mission to work with councillors, with youth groups, with social workers, basically anybody that will work with me to try and get some sort of understanding of the next steps. Now, we know that the background to this is the cuts to youth services, cuts to early years. I was the shadow minister for early years for 2 years, and I know if you don't have good early years provisions, Sure Start and so on, the families that you want to help often go unnoticed, and then you pick up the problem later in life. We also know that there's a rise in mental health problems amongst young people, but also drugs in our community. We can't stand by and let it happen. So I'm very pleased to be on this webinar. And, you know, having raised it with Jacob Rees-Mogg, that we haven't had a debate, hopefully I can press for that debate. But we need more than debates. We need work on the ground. And over the summer, hopefully we can have a knife amnesty, and there's lots of things we can put in place. And I know that the council are absolutely behind, well, side by side with myself and the councillors to try and get some change. But also, can I say also thank you to the police for acting so swiftly when they did. The people that have been arrested, you know, it's a swift response. And I know that the police cuts have had a real impact on our community. And there are some crimes that I know people are frustrated, burglaries and so on, that you don't get an instant response. But when something like this happens, the police are absolutely there, and they're protecting our young people as best they can. So let's work together. And I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say and how we can work side by side. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. The police, I'll bring them in. So Alan, do you want to just say a few words and maybe then pass it on to Andrew in terms of what the bigger picture is in terms of what we're dealing with, and Andrew then can give a local context?
Well, yeah, I'll just give. Do you want me to give an update on the investigation?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Just introduction first. I'm Chief Inspector Alan Travis. I'm one of the senior leadership team at Kirklees, and I'm in charge of neighbourhood policing and partnership working across the district. So just an update in regards to the terrible murder. Just a rider before I start. Obviously, I'm somewhat limited as to the depth of details that I can provide at this moment. It is very much an ongoing murder investigation, of which there will be a court and judicial process to follow. So I will give as much detail as I can, but obviously there are some things that I will be unable to discuss. However, just for everybody's awareness, then we received a call at just before 10:30 p.m. on Sunday, the 21st of July, regarding a report of a disturbance on Parkcroft at Batley. As a result of that disturbance, a seriously injured male was located, who was obviously later identified as Bradley Gledhill, and sadly he later died of his injuries, and we of course immediately launched a murder inquiry. That murder inquiry has been run by our homicide and major inquiry team under the direction of Senior Detective DCI Vanessa Rolfe. One male was arrested on the evening of that offence, and then within a couple of days, 3 further males have also been arrested. It has been a complex and fast-moving investigation, but Vanessa has asked me to pass on our thanks to the public for their extraordinary response in coming forward and assisting with information. And to date, 3 men have been charged with that offence of murder, have appeared in court for their initial hearing on Thursday, and have been remanded into custody, so are off the streets until the court case. As I've mentioned, it is still an active inquiry. There are still a number of lines ongoing. Vanessa has asked me to again put a plea out to the community. Does in this case. It was obviously a busy residential area, so there will have been a lot of people around at the time. And if anybody does have any information that could assist us, if they can please make contact either through 101. If they wish to remain anonymous, they can do so through Crime Stoppers. And if anybody has any CCTV or pictures or mobile footage that they think might be able to help, then there is a portal on our website where people can submit that direct. Okay, so it was obviously a horrendous incident. It continues to be an extensive investigation. We are continuing with an increased police presence in the area to provide reassurance, and that will continue obviously over the weekend and into next week. We are currently looking at the feasibility of potentially getting some form of mobile police station set up next week in the area with sort of local authority staff, just to give the community a chance to come and speak to us if they wish to either raise any concerns that they might have as a result of this incident, or to speak to us about the investigation that is ongoing. And I will confirm details of that as soon as I can. As you've alluded to at the beginning, and as Tracy has mentioned, serious violent crime is one of our main priorities here in the police. We fully understand how much fear it can bring to local communities. But as has been alluded by all of you so far, we are working as hard as we can with partners through the Violence Reduction Unit and with the support of the Police and Crime Commissioner to really sort of take a public health approach with partners to get to the bottom of the causes of serious violent crime, and in particular why people carry knives on the streets, so that we can prevent terrible incidents like this happening again in the future.
Thanks, Alan. Can I just ask the panelists to mute? I think there's some feedback that's interfering in the live stream. Sergeant Andrew Maloney, do you want to say a few words, please?
Yeah, I'm Sergeant Andrew Maloney, working at Batley and Spennett Neighbourhood Policing Team, also cover the Batley West area. Back in May 2020, we've received information from local councils in relation to antisocial behaviour within the Jessex Park area. And on receipt of that information, the park's been patrolled very regularly. We've located a couple of groups of youth a couple of times, once in May and once this month. However, we've never found any evidence of drug use or alcohol. The only issue that we did find was litter. So we've been working with the council. PC Ramsden's contacted members of the public, and more than anything, I encourage people to report incidents of antisocial behaviour at the time it's happening. So first of all, we're aware and we can respond and deal with them. We're actively working within the schools in relation to knife crime. We're always doing that. PSSOs are going to schools to educate youngsters in relation to the use of knives and carrying knives and what could happen. And also we've been actively working within the area in relation to drugs issues over the last 2 months. We've located 8 cannabis farms in the Batley area, and also we've located business premises within the Batley area where over 500 cannabis plants were seized. And very recently this month we've had 20 kilograms of cannabis seized in the Healy area. So we are out there actively working and trying to prevent things happening. And we've got officers out regularly stopping vehicles in the Batley area, making arrests for drug possession and drug driving. So again, we encourage members of the public to report anything that's happening or going on at the time it's happening, then we will respond and deal with it.
Thank you, Andrew. Lee, can I bring you in? Lee Hamilton is our Community Safety Manager in Kirklees. Lee, just a quick few words from you.
Yep, good evening everybody. So thank you, Shabir. Lee Hamilton, Safer Kirklees Manager. For those people that might be a little bit unsure what Safer Kirklees is, it's the partnership that coordinates our response to crime, antisocial behaviour and other issues that might be affecting communities in Batley and in Batley West and across Kirklees. So like the police, the local authority have limited resources, as do partners. So Safer Kirklees really does rely on the partnership coming together to tackle some of the issues that we're going to discuss today. I'd just like to reiterate some of the things that Sergeant Maloney and Chief Inspector Alan Travis have said. Violence Reduction Partnership, working really closely with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to tackle knife crime, gang violence, and the local authority really are front and centre at that. Just a reminder to residents as well in terms of reporting, because that will be a key theme that comes through from ourselves today. We do have the Victims Hub in Batley, where members of the public can call in, report things confidentially to a member of the local authority staff, so a victims and witness officer. So that's a real key asset for members of the community as well. And I just put that plea out there again as well regarding reporting. We have to be data and intelligence led as a partnership because of resources, and it really is important that people do report things through the appropriate channels. So social media and WhatsApp, yes, have a role, but making sure it's reported through the appropriate channels helps us with our response, but also in our response to preventing things happening in the first place. So thank you, Shabir.
Thank you, Lee. We'll go on to the questions now. So we'll go through the
Shabir, you've currently frozen. I'm happy to pick the questions up if you'd like.
Yeah, I think my connection is good. Can you hear me?
We can now, yeah.
Yeah, good. Did you get the question, or do you want me to repeat that question?
Please repeat, Shabir.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, sorry, it's just that the broadband connections are very limited in certain areas. I would like to ask why the council is not willing to fund youth clubs and activities in Batley and East and West in order to reduce ASB issues and criminality. I suppose this is a question that directed to me because it concerns about a big service that we run in the council. First, to get things into context, you will remember in 2008 we had the massive crisis, the banking crisis, and as a result of that, the norm was that we have to go into austerity for the next 10 years, and that meant that up to 2018 we had to make cuts year on year, and these were just cuts here and there. These are like massive cuts. Show start centres were ripped out, heart communities were ripped out, youth services were completely abolished, and basic services which we take for granted completely disseminated. So when I became leader, one of the first things I did 2 years ago, and I've only been leader for 2 years, is myself and Jackie, we sat down and we said we cannot carry on the way we are. So what we did was we actually said let's look at the positives, and what we did was we made a pledge that we will create an investment budget. And I want to focus on the families and the children and the youth services in this particular bit. So the biggest difference that we can make to youth and young people is to actively engage with families, with schools and communities that helps our young people thrive and basically take pride in the local areas, and that's the biggest challenge. Every young person matters, and every single person matters to me. That's why young people is a massive priority to me, and I'll tell you why, because there's some money that we put behind that service. So what we've done to make sure that every child fulfills their full potential and succeed in life, and we don't see the events that took place last weekend here or anywhere else, is we've invested 170,000. This is last year's budget, so it's in year. We've invested 170,000 per year to support carers and support people who actually need that support, because a lot of the folk that we're talking about in Batley and Spend live in poverty and deprived communities, and we want to do everything we can, and that's why we put that £170,000 in that budget. We've put in 823,000, just short of $1 million, into multi-systemic therapy for children who actually need that help. And again, a lot of the kids we're talking about do need help, and that money will actually go a long way to actually make sure that we don't see this kind of issues we saw over the weekend. We've put in 484,000 a year for the next 3 years that will be spent on specialist social workers who actually can work and think out of the box and engage with people who actually are falling off the edge. And it's far too often we see people falling off the edge, and that leaves us with the tragedy that we're facing now. Also, intervention and prevention work into youth services will be supported. And you're quite right, the person who asked me the question, that youth services have been disseminated. And the question is, why are we willingly doing that? We're not doing anything willingly. You know, willingly we would spend. What we've been forced is to cut services, and hopefully what we're doing now with the councillors across the council is to put money back in. So that's why we put in £600,000 year on year to help tackle antisocial behaviour. That's what we're talking about. Gang and knife crime. That's what we're talking about. And that is this year, next year and the following years. And an extra £400,000 will be going to improving domestic abuse cases. Because if you look at the statistics behind the figures we're talking about, they will all come from neighbourhoods and areas where we have got massive poverty, massive deprivation, and that is the underlying cause. We need to get the young people to actually take pride back in the areas. We need to work with families, we need to work with everybody in the community, and that is the only way we'll actually be able to actually get something to actually understand and build a better future. So in terms of supporting children is a big priority for us. So that's why what we did was we've reversed the £250,000. That's £250,000 to fully recognise young people So that was an in-year saving or in-year cut, and we've reversed that to make sure that we support children in communities like ours. And also what we're doing is a lot of kids don't go to school for whatever reason. When I was young, it was called nicking off, so truanting. So what we've done is we've put in £206,000 as of this year and next year and thereafter into developing virtual schools, online schools, where we can engage with kids directly to make sure that they get better education and make sure that the deprived communities, just because they're not at school, we offer them another alternative. So I hope I've gone on to answer that question in terms of what is the council doing. We don't like cutting stuff, but we are forced to cut stuff. So hopefully that'll give you assurance in terms of the money we're actually putting back in. I'll go on to the next question. Next question is the gangs are gathering in our areas, even though we are with COVID-19 lockdown period, but the councillors and the police are ignoring it. Did the police try to stop this type of open gathering and parties? So what I'll do is I'll ask the police to respond to that, and maybe then if Lee, you want to come in. So can I ask Chief Inspector Alan Travis to address that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly I will do, Shabir, thank you. OK, I'll be honest, sort of policing during the COVID lockdown has been a challenge for us here. Obviously, the restrictions came into place at the end of March. They came in all of a sudden. There were brand new legislation to us and the public. And obviously came in at a very difficult time because we, like everywhere else, had a number of issues to deal with around staffing, absences, isolation, etc., etc. So it was a challenging time for us. But please rest assured that we have done our utmost to support the rest of the country in what is obviously a public health issue around the coronavirus. The neighbourhood policing teams have been at the forefront of dealing with people who have not been adhering to the COVID restrictions. But we have been very conscious from the beginning of obviously our work that we need to keep the public on side during this difficult time. So we have tried to reach a very delicate balance on how we have enforced these restrictions, partly to keep the public on side, and secondly, because it became evident fairly quickly that there were a number of people that were potentially breaching the restrictions through a lack of knowledge as opposed to doing it intentionally. So like the police across the rest of the country, we have taken up what's called a 4E approach, which was a 4-step process that we have undertaken with the public. The first of those is to engage with them, which basically meant that we stopped and spoke to anybody that we found in breach of the COVID regulations to find out who they were and what they were doing. We explained to them what the law was and what they were and weren't allowed to do to make sure that they had a clear understanding of what the restrictions were. We encouraged them to comply with them. So if they were out of their house illegally or gathering in groups that they shouldn't have been, we encouraged them to go home and obey the law. And as a last resort, if those first 3 approaches did not result in success, we moved on to enforcement, which was basically gave us a power to either give people warnings, issue them with fixed penalty notices, or even arrest them in the most extreme of cases. Enforcement was a very last resort for us for the reasons that I've outlined. However, we have done a lot of enforcement in the local area, particularly for those people that have repeatedly and blatantly ignored the legislation. So particularly gangs of youths, groups in the local area that have day after day been hanging out on the streets in breach of the COVID regulations. The demand that we have faced during this time has been extremely high. At its peak, we were getting up to 200 calls a day from the public across Kirklees purely in relation to breaches of the COVID legislation. And bearing in mind that a normal busy day for us used to be about 350 calls, an additional 200 on top of that, as you can imagine, has been a massive challenge for us. So we have responded to them as quickly as we can. We've had to prioritise those that carried the highest risk. We have looked at every single call that has come through, and we have issued over 80 fixed penalty notices to people during the months of April and May. We will obviously continue to deal with the issues now that the lockdown is reduced a little bit. Still illegal for groups to gather outside in numbers more than 6 on most occasions, unless they're of the same household. So we will continue to respond to reports from the public, and the local neighbourhood team are continuing to patrol around locations where we're likely to get groups gathering, so green spaces such as Jessop's Park and other local areas. So we are doing our best in a difficult situation.
Thank you very much, Alan. Very comprehensive, and it just goes to show that the amount of work that's gone in and the extra work that's been created on top of everything else. Lee, can I ask you to come in, please?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the local authority, we redirected resources to support some of the work that Chief Inspector Travis was talking about. So our community and environmental support officers, along with some enforcement officers across the council, followed the model that Alan spoke around the 4 E's, had conversations with people, tried to redirect them, encouraging positive behaviours, and where there were breaches of social distancing, this is where this information was fed back to the police for some of the enforcement that Alan has spoken about. Should be not on the question, but just to remind people that we are answering pre-submitted questions at this stage.
Yes, yes. So basically, what happened was there's been some questions that have actually already been submitted before this meeting. So I'm going through them, and we also have a question, answer, and comment section on the live stream. We are monitoring that. We've got limited time, but just in case we don't get through all of them, please be assured we will take that into consideration fully, and we will act on it, because there are common themes that are coming out already. And just to tell you what the common themes are, it's around antisocial behaviour, gang, knife crime, and basically people know this is happening, but they are scared. They don't feel comfortable in reporting fear of crime, and we can understand that completely. And we will also take that feedback and look at how we can actually address that, because it's very difficult to actually ring somebody, ring the police up and say so-and-so is dealing in drugs and these activities are taking place, because any reasonable person would be scared of any repercussions. So we understand that, we appreciate that. So all your feedback is really important. I know it's frustrating, but it's important that we actually try and get through as much as we can in this meeting. Also to get you the facts over in terms of exactly what is happening there, because there's a lot of rumours that go around, there's a lot of fake news that goes around, there's a lot of social media stuff that goes around. But if you hear it from the horse's mouth, sort of speaking, from the police, from the council, from the councillors and the MPs, then at least you know what the situation is. We as local councillors and MPs are always here. You've got our number. Please feel free to contact us. We'll go to the next question. Question 3. Areas have been deprived for a long time. What is the council and councillors doing about this? And again, I think I'll take this question, because it's more of a question for politicians. Firstly, let me just start by saying that successive governments, it doesn't matter if it's Labour or Tory or a coalition, have actually tried to grapple with this issue around deprivation, the gap between the rich and the poor, have and the have-nots, for many generations. And unfortunately, and these are all facts, so I'm not making any political points. These are facts, and it's already well documented. The last 10 years of austerity has shown that deprivation, poverty, and health inequalities have actually got worse. And on the back of that, you've all seen the Public Health England report, which came out very recently, that says that if you live in deprived areas, if you live in poverty, if you are from a black and ethnic minority community, you are up to 4 times more likely to die. That's how much the inequalities we face in our communities. So on the back of that, as a council, we have prioritised this area to make sure that we actually start to address that. We don't have a magic wand that we can just, at a stroke that will sort it out, because these are deep-rooted organisational, structural, and generational issues. But I'll tell you the issues we are taking on board fully. Inequalities, not least around the Black Lives Matters, but all forms of inequalities. That is a priority for this council. Also, young people, and I mentioned the amount of money that's gone into the budget. And also, we were classed as poor in our Ofsted rating, and I'm really pleased that we have actually been taking out special measures to take that special measure, we have to invest £11 million into our young people. We haven't got there yet, a long way to go, but we will make sure we get there. And another priority for me is inclusive growth. What that basically means is the wealth that is created and generated locally, how much of that goes back into our local economy. And I'll tell you how we're doing that. Firstly, the council is a massive buyer of goods and services. So what we're doing is we're actually gearing the organisation up that we use local suppliers and local contractors, whereby we actually breaking up contracts. And at the moment, we our economy, our buying power locally is about 100 million quid. And what we're going to do is within the next couple of years, we're going to actually double that to 200 million quid. So that means that local suppliers will get the bite at the cherry first, and that money will then go into the local economy. And that way we can actually start to address some of the health inequalities and we get better paid jobs. The other thing we're doing is big employers. So you've got the police, we've got the local authority, we've got the university, we've got the college, and we've got the NHS trust, both in Huddersfield and Dewsbury and Wakefield in the surrounding areas. And also we have got some big employers here around here. It's Foxes, we've got the Kalon Paint, we've also got the Cummins factories in Huddersfield. They are local employers and they are big employers. So again, what we're trying to do, we're trying to use them as anchors to make
Should be we lost you there slightly.
Am I back on?
Yep.
Yeah. So what I was saying was once we do all that, we will then create a local economy where people automatically prosper because the money within Kirklees, the Kirklees pound stays within Kirklees, and by that it's a perpetuating economic growth locally, and that's another way to do that. And also in terms of our assets. Now, when I talk about assets, I'm not just talking about the council buildings. Community assets, they're everywhere. So what we have done is we have opened up our doors for organisations to come forward and take on the community assets. And one of the things I'd just like to put out there is we have an asset in Justice Park. Now, Gwen and I, when we were first elected in 2002, 3, 4, that park was a complete derelict park. And those of you who know will know exactly what we mean. And what we did was we haven't got there, but we actually have worked really hard over the years. And what we'd like to do is, separate to this meeting, start to look at how we can transfer the asset and the community comes forward and we can do something really great in that park. And this is just for the residents of Batley West who live in that area. Because I know that there's people listening far afield, but this is a priority because obviously that park is an issue. We understand that. We've done a lot of work on that. You will remember that that park was a very dark path, had no lights. We put lights on there because it's a public footpath. We can't shut it because there's all sorts of legislation that's around that. But we can make that one of the best parks in Kirklees, and if not in West Yorkshire. But we need your help to doing that. Gwen, do you want to come in there? You have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Red. Just to speak on Jessops Park, like you say, we go back many years and that park had been neglected and we worked hard with the council. But then we reached the point of austerity and it was cut, which meant that we couldn't invest any money into that wonderful park. There used to be a lake there, a fountain there, a small bandstand. It was a beautiful, beautiful park. And we want to restore that park back to its proper use for people to be able to be safe, working closely with the parks departments as councillors ourselves and working with the police and community safety to make that park safe. And just as a side, a lady phoned me yesterday, and it's like we say, social media sometimes it can sort of put out false things out there. And this lady was a bit upset because somebody had said to her, there's a possibility they'll bulldoze that park and put houses there. Okay, no, please, just come to us as councillors and we will share it with you and we will work with you to make that park a lovely place, which it should be for people to use and for young people to go in and also feel safe in that park, and also for the local residents to have a park on their doorstep that they can be proud of. Thanks, Shabir.
Thank you. Yusra, do you want to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to add what Councillor Gwen said. Obviously being a councillor, have done sort of, just to add to what Councillor Gwen Lowe is saying, I have done some work in Jessop's Park with a small team and the resources we have, as you mentioned, Shabir. We have been trying to work in that park. We have been litter picking and we have been cutting back the trees and the woodland in order to make it a safe area for people, in order to make it inviting. And that was some positive work that was going on, even though we were a small community group and there was an officer working with us. So I'm really proud of the work that we've achieved as well so far, but it obviously it does take time, and we'll continue to do that. And as our councillors, we are committed as well.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's just that I'm conscious that I want to get through as many questions as possible. I'll go on to the next question, which is to the police, and maybe Lee can chip in. One obvious question is, how are we going to tackle the lawless disregard driving of young men in high performance cars, quads, that are blighting the general population? So,
yep, certainly I'll take that one, Shabir. So starting with the first bit regarding driving, obviously road safety is one of our key priorities. It's in the police and crime plan, particularly around reducing the number of people that are killed and seriously injured on our roads. We do have a partnership, Kirklees Road Safety Partnership, that I attend along with representatives from the council, highways, fire and rescue, etc., etc. So we've got a real joined up approach that looks at preventing dangerous driving, educating people, making the roads safer through their layouts. So there's some really good work ongoing there at a strategic level. At a practical level, the MPTs do as much as they can around roads policing and targeting dangerous driving. We've increased the number of staff locally that are now trained to use the speed guns so that they can get out and about and respond to calls from the public around speeding driving. We've increased the number of deployments that we've had, particularly during the beginning part of the lockdown, because with the roads being quieter, there was a definite uplift in dangerous driving from the few that were still on the street. So we did some good work around that. Andy's MPT team runs regularly an operation known as Operation Telegate, which sees police officers and other staff using local buses to travel on so that they can spot drivers using mobile phones, not wearing seat belts, and some of the other fatal indicators that tend to indicate dangerous and reckless driving. So we do have a real joined up partnership approach around dangerous driving. High performance cars themselves are a bit of a specific issue. As you'll be aware, people often rent them for short periods or for special occasions, sometimes use them to show off to their friends without understanding the real consequences of their actions. So we are doing as much as we can, again, from a partnership point of view, to link into the people that are responsible for renting out those cars, just to make sure that everything is done above board and only sensible people are getting those hands on them. The second part around quad bikes and off-road motorcycles, we have unfortunately seen an uplift in the number of reports around nuisance motorbikes over recent months. A bit of a perfect storm, unfortunately, I think, regarding obviously the nice weather that we've seen and also the COVID lockdown has potentially left a number of people with more time on their hands than they would normally have. To try and tackle that, we have received some additional funding to get some more local staff trained up on being able to use our off-road motorbikes, because they are a really good tactic for us to be able to deal with people. We use Section 59 powers to seize bikes whenever we can, and obviously deal with any road traffic offences. And if I can just bring Andy Maloney in very briefly, just to talk about Operation Tyre Minster, which is a specific operation that's starting from next week around this, I believe.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's Operation Tyre Minster we'll be launching. It's another way that people can report dangerous driving and any road-related offences directly to us. There'll be an email address that people can send video clips in, CCTV footage, dashcam footage to us, and we'll deal with that. As from then, any other reports, any information, they can provide that anonymously, or they can give us information and we can speak to them further in relation to that. We'll also be doing days of action in relation to off-road bikes with that as well. So all that will be broadcast next week via our Batley and Spend Facebook site, and also if you want to sign up to our community alert, West Yorkshire Police community alert, it'll be on there as well.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Alan, for the answers. I'll go on to the next question, which is also for the police. How are the police enforcing the law on this who do not have driving licenses and driving around the trade, driving without trade plates, or sorry, driving with trade plates? So folk without driving licenses who are driving with trade plates?
Yeah, it's a very similar response, really. Obviously, driving without a licence is a clear offence that we do tackle. Obviously, we regularly stop vehicles to check that the driver is properly insured and has a licence. But if the community are able to provide us with further intelligence to make our patrols more targeted around who is driving motor vehicles without licences, if they can give us details of vehicle registrations, then we can get markers put on their cars so that if officers spot them when they're out and about, they know they're worth a stop. So please, a plea to the public, if they've got any particular intelligence around that, to submit it to us. If they want to remain anonymous, as with all things, they can use Crime Stoppers to let us know about that. Trade plates is a slightly difficult area. Obviously, it has been abused over the years by some people who use traders' policies to drive numerous vehicles without having the cost of a specific insurance policy. It has got a lot better over the last years. We have done a lot of work nationally with insurance companies around it, done a lot of education of staff so that they know what is and isn't allowed on traders' policies. And there is now a full insurance database on the police and national computer system so that when we stop people with traders' policies, we can be as robust as we can to make sure that they're being used appropriately in the course of trading and not just for people to drive any car that they wish.
Thank you, Alan. Tracy, do you want to come in here?
Yes, thank you so much. And they're brilliant schemes and fantastic approach by the police, really community based. But my worry is looking at the summer coming up, we've got a lot of young people with nowhere to go and nothing to do. We are going to have, after COVID, rising youth unemployment. The schools aren't open, so the police can't get their message in there. So it's really important that we've got the council on site, as we have. They're determined to put money into this, but that we can work with, for example, Training Cave or Purge, boxing clubs that can give opportunities to young people to use their energy and their creativity in other ways so that we can ensure they're just not hanging around with nothing to do. It's really important that we work together because COVID is going to have a massive impact on our community, and there are going to be a lot of young people that just are a little bit lost. So it's important that we get that strategy together as a group. And I'd be really interested, those who are watching this webinar, if you've got suggestions of how we can work together with support from the police, that would be great. And also just to mention that Crime Stoppers is of course anonymous, so no one would know that you've made that call. So please do get involved. The police need the numbers, they need the clusters of information so that they can act. And also just finally about the high performance cars, I've been working with Holly Lynch to try and get a change in the law that if you give the keys to a car you have rented and that car then kills someone, you are culpable. It's really important that it can't just be, I don't know who had the keys, I don't know who was driving. It has to be that you are involved and to blame, because we can't have those Ferraris roaring around our small villages and narrow streets. It's just not good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. We'll go on to the next question. Again, it's to the police. In the last few years, there has been an increase in crime in the area. What steps are the council and the police taking to reduce this crime and also to deal with the epidemic of drug-related issues and crimes? Alan?
Yeah, certainly. I must admit I was a little bit disappointed with that question, because whilst if you look at sort of 3 years of data, there has been a couple of years of small increase in crime in the local area. In the last 12 months, crime in Batley and Dewsbury has decreased in some areas quite dramatically. So if we just compare the years sort of 2018-19 to 19-20, and we measure our crime statistics from April to March. Burglary dwellings, which are houses, sheds and garages, were down 9%. Burglaries of businesses were down 1%. Theft of motor vehicles were down 19%. Robberies were down 21%. Criminal damage was down 10%. Assault with injury was down 8%, and antisocial behaviour was down 13%. And if you look at the crime statistics so far this year, they're even more marked, and I do accept that some of this will be down to COVID. But so far this year, compared to the year before, burglary residential are down 57, so we've only had 85 compared to 142 this time last year. Burglaries of businesses are down 97, so we've had just 27 compared to 124, and that list goes on really. Crime is down in every category across the board. So it does concern me that that is not the perception and how people are feeling out on the street potentially. So I do accept there is more work for us to do about making sure that people feel safe and about communicating that. Those crime drops have come down to some real good work again by the neighbourhood teams. Have had some excellent arrests locally of high volume criminals that have resulted in some substantial prison sentences. Again, we work closely with Lee and his team to provide reassurance with people. And we have obviously a really joined up approach around our approach to tackling crime. In relation to the specific mention of drug related crimes, obviously we all know that drug use is one of the drivers that does force some people into the life of crime. And again, we do as much work with partners to try and tackle that issue through interventions of drugs and alcohol services. We have something called the Liaison and Diversion Team that works within the custody area that sees people whilst they are under arrest and tries to make an assessment as to what causes them to commit crime and provides the appropriate interventions to try and get them off a life of drugs and straighten them out. So there is a real joined up approach to try and tackle that circle of repeat offending. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alan. One of the things that people might be thinking of is they've reported it and they feel that nothing's happening. So do you want to, because you rightly mentioned that, you know, report it, but when people report it, they say that nothing happens.
Yeah, certainly. So our outcome rate, which is what we call, I suppose, the chance of somebody getting arrested and charged, has decreased over the last 12 months, and it is something we are aware of. It is a national picture. That has come about for potentially a number of reasons. Obviously, resources are difficult. I know that's not an excuse, but they do remain a challenge for us. Demand has got a lot more complex nowadays, so criminal investigations are certainly not as straightforward as they were 20 years ago when I joined. Every offence has CCTV, technical inquiries, forensic inquiries, so investigations are a lot more complex than they used to be. So we are aware of it locally. We're doing as much as we can to upskill our staff around investigations, trying to get the victim to the heart of every crime that we investigate, because whilst they are just figures and data on a page, we know how much they mean to the individuals that report them. So we are trying to instill that mindset into our staff so that they do the absolute utmost, that when people do report crimes to us, that we do as thorough as investigation as we can and try and get a positive result for those victims.
Thank you, Alan. Lee, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Shabir. Just going on the question in terms of what steps are the council and police taking, well, first thing is we have to understand the problems. So going back to your point about people reporting and feel like nothing is happening, sometimes that feeds into a little bit of a bigger picture. So we have to understand the problem. So location, times, days, dates and places, we need that to continue. We have to try and prevent future generations becoming involved in crime, so through education. So we work very closely with local schools. We work very closely, it's already been mentioned, with local groups, so Jack's Training Cave, Batley Bulldogs, etc. We do lots and lots of workshops there. And we've held over the past 3 years boot camps in the local area, attracting young people who are becoming involved in crime and antisocial behaviour. It's also important as well that those that are most prominent in causing crime and antisocial behaviour, we challenge and deter their behaviour, you know, so through early intervention. And then, as Alan has mentioned, you know, the enforcement angle is crucial to some of this as well, and something that as a partnership we're keen on doing, not just through the police, but through the local authority as well, and the tools and powers we have.
Thank you, Lee. Just something else that I mentioned earlier on, and I think people are just querying, what does that mean? when I talked about asset transfer, you know, any asset you see that belongs to the council, if you can work up a solution in terms of how we can make that work better for the community, the council will listen. Obviously, it's public money, so we've got to make sure that we do it right. So when I talked about Jessop's Park, if people want to come forward and we can have a conversation, we can see how we can do that. So any asset of the council, not just parks, but also buildings, and we've done that in other areas. What I'll do is I'll take the next question now. The next question is, do local councillors need to have an understanding of job creation, bringing resources from central government grant to all deprived areas, and what are the views on the high proportion of deaths? I think I'll take the answer. First and foremost, as a local councillor, and this is not just as a Labour councillor, but anybody who wants to go into local politics want to do it because they want to make a difference, and they've got a passion to make sure that they address the issues that we're talking about now. Because we live in a democracy, right? It's always difficult to actually do that. But I admire everybody who becomes a councillor across any party, and B, stands for public office, because you know that shows that their commitment is there, and I really admire that and I respect that, and I think it's good. So in terms of councillors, they will come and they will have a range of passions. And one of the passions is actually making a difference to communities, and that's where we need people who actually understand and can speak the language of the community. You know, we don't want geeks and we don't want technocrats. So I think I need to start from there. Also, in terms of the councillors, what role do they play in terms of bringing resources? Well, let me just update you regarding what the councillors of this council, along with all our MPs, be it Conservative or Labour, have done.
I think we've lost Shabir. No,
Yeah.
he's.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Am I
We can
back
now.
on?
Yeah. You're back now.
Yeah. So I was talking about the devolution deals. All 69 councillors on a cross-party basis, and the 4 MPs, we have secured one of the best combined authority devolution deals for a mayor we will ever see in a generation. And let me explain what we've done by that. What I mean by that. Firstly, adult education budget, apprenticeships, employers and giving new business a startup. So what we've done is £183 million 10-year transport fund. We will be responsible for that ourselves. We won't have to put bids in and jump through a number of hoops. That will be a given. 570 million local growth fund for the local economy across West Yorkshire. And that means an additional £1.1 billion for the next 30 years. £38 million West Yorkshire Investment Fund, additional monies to actually invest in local communities, and this will all come into effect next May. Once we get the devolution agreement and the mayor through. There's still some way to go. £317 million for Transforming Cities Fund, and all areas of Kirklees will benefit from that. We've got adult education at the moment. The adult education budget sits with colleges and universities. So once we actually get through the mayoral deal, £63 million of adult education, which includes the kind of people we're talking about, because these young people who we have seen doing taking place in the issues that we saw over last weekend, you know, we need to give them direction. And if we can control that £63 million of adult education budget at local level, that's massive, and that's what we've done. Also, £3.2 million year on year to actually bring forward economic regeneration that we can actually then provide local communities, young people with the jobs that they need. So basically, you know, there's a lot of things already there, and what I've just explained to you, that is only possible in terms of bringing them resources in by working with national government, working with our MPs, working with our councillors, and that's the big prize. And hopefully we will see the fruits of that and the benefits of that coming through in the years to come. In terms of, you know, you mentioned in the second part about high proportion of deaths, my views. My view is that the virus, the pandemic, it does not discriminate against anybody. It will go for anybody. It attacks human beings, no matter who you are. And that pandemic is still very, very real. The virus is very, very potent. It's very dangerous. And although we're going through an easing of lockdown, I would ask everybody to just be mindful that it's not gone away. What we don't want is we don't want more lives to be shattered. We don't want more livelihoods to be shattered. And we don't want our lifestyles to be curtailed the way we've seen in the last few months. You know, we want to make sure that we act sensibly. Anyway, I'll take the next question. Next question is to the police again. Over the last few years, we have seen an increase in drug use, drug dealing and gang violence. What are police doing to address these issues and be able to respond quicker to these issues, which will then prevent such issues escalating? Early intervention is key to prevention and reduction. Alan, please.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Shabir. So I'll just talk about drug dealing, drug possession, etc. initially. I'll make it clear we will not tolerate drug dealing or illegal possession in our communities. However, it is a difficult area for us to police. We do, of course, have powers to stop and search people and cars and search them. We have powers to apply to magistrates' courts and get warrants so that we can force entry into people's addresses and search for drugs. But to quite rightfully conduct both of those activities, we need to be intelligence-led. We can't just pick and choose where we undertake such activity. We need to have intelligence to allow us to do that. And the main place where we get our intelligence from is the community. We need people to give us information as to who is involved in the local community in drug dealing. We need accurate information. We need names. We need registration numbers. We need locations. I understand comments that have been made about fears of retribution, but as Tracy has said, there is Crime Stoppers available, which is completely anonymous. There is no way you will be traced through that. I can assure you that we have processes in place to obviously protect the identity of people that provide us with information. We will never let that information out into the public. So if you can come to us, you can do so in confidence. I do understand the feedback that we get a lot from the community, that they give us information and we do nothing with it. That is because, unfortunately, tackling drug dealing is a bit of a slow burn investigation. When I say we need information and intelligence from the community, we need it from a variety of sources. If just one person tells us that there are drugs being kept at an address, that is insufficient for us to get a warrant. We need it from a number of different sources and corroboration before the magistrates will grant us a warrant. So sometimes if somebody gives us a piece of information, it might just sit there for weeks, even months, before we get enough to corroborate it and then act on it. So please, I ask people, don't lose faith in us. Keep providing us with the information. Just because you don't see any immediate action, I can assure you that it's all being stored in our computer systems, and as soon as we have enough intelligence to act, we will do. I'll come on to Andy in a minute, who'll talk around some of the successes that the local team have had around drug dealing recently, but I'll just pick up the second part of that question, if I may, around gang violence. Obviously, it links into, I suppose, one of the reasons we're here around serious violent crime on the streets and knife possession. We've already talked around the approach that we're taking with partners around the violence reduction unit. Linked into that is a lot of enforcement work by the police to try and dismantle what we called organised crime groups. And these are essentially people who make their living out of causing misery on societies through pushing drugs to people. And we are dedicated and have dedicated teams to try and dismantle these groups through a number of ways and prevent them from undertaking the activity that they do. That can involve covert resources, it can involve arrest and imprisonment, it can involve warrants, it can involve taking possessions off people, using money laundering activities. We throw the full weight of law and legislation against these people to try and prevent them undertaking the activities that they do. I'll just go to Andy, if I can, just around the drug dealing activity that his team have been undertaking.
Yes, as previously mentioned, last 2 months we've dealt with 8 cannabis farms. All of these were intelligence-led from the public, and again we've gone to the magistrates and we've got warrants because there was information there. So again, the amount of reporting that we get is brilliant, and I encourage more and more reporting, because we'll do something with it. As the Chief Inspector said, the more information that we've got. Other than that, with regular stopping vehicles, regularly stopping searching people within vehicles, finding drugs, arresting people for that and dealing with them. But at least, as the Chief Inspector also said, these things, investigations take time, because any drugs investigations then involve forensics with the drugs, so it does take a number of months to get an outcome with that.
Thank you. What I'm going to do now is we've gone through the written questions. So I'm now going to take the questions as they've come in from the chat. There's a lot of overlaps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sort of like get the key ones out. The first question really is quite a focused issue in Batley West, not far from where the incident took place. There's a girdle between Woodsome Estate and Woodfield Avenue. It needs cleaning. We do clean it every time, because I've been involved with that on a number of occasions, and I'm sure my colleagues have as well. But there's a lot of drug dealing that's taking place, and how can locals get CCTV in there? What's the process? Is it really straightforward to get CCTV? So maybe Alan, you want to come in, and then maybe Lee, because I think there's a misconception by putting CCTV in, it stops everything. But so you want to just Alan go first, and then Lee.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about the difficulties around CCTV, I suppose, and then Lee can talk about the process for getting it, if indeed it is possible. So CCTV can be a deterrent, don't get me wrong. It does sometimes send people to different locations where there aren't cameras, but likewise, it is not a perfect tool. People are quite easily able to disguise themselves from CCTV using face coverings, wearing dark clothing. It's not always particularly good quality at night if there's not sufficient lighting. So whilst it does provide a deterrent and does provide us with an investigative tool, it is certainly not a cure-all to drug dealing, unfortunately. It's just one part of a wider problem. I don't know if Lee wants to answer the rest.
Yeah, in terms of CCTV, it's not something that Safer Kirklees offer. As an authority, we have a mobile CCTV van that can be assisted and deployed to relevant locations. I do know in other localities that members of the public have tried to draw on elected members to support them with the funding for CCTV kind of privately, and maybe drawing up some funds themselves to do that. But it's not something that Safer Kirklees offer, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Lee. So that's something that we could look at in terms of offering some kind of a mobile solution. Thanks for that. Another question that's come through is, and again, there's a lot of questions around this, but the police presence. So if the police presence was there and we see the bobbies on the beat, it would deter people. So two questions really. One is, how are we doing that, and what's the effectiveness of that? And B, are we doing that at the moment with everything that's taking place, especially in that particular area?
Yeah, okay, well, I'll talk about that. We obviously understand the importance of visibility to the community, and it is obviously one of the criticisms that we regularly face, that we aren't as visible as we should be, and we do understand that, and we do accept that. Please rest assured that we do the absolutely best job that we can with the resources that we have available. Obviously, we have competing demands. Things like investigating crime, things like investigating drug dealing does take officers off the street, so they are not visible. Our visibility is very much driven around our neighbourhood policing team, so we do have dedicated staff. At the front of that are the police and community support officers that are obviously a uniformed visible presence and are our constant eyes and ears on the ground. So Andy, who is obviously on this meeting, has his team of constables and PCSOs that work regularly within the ward areas, get to know where the hotspots are, the locations where things are happening and where they need to be, and try and be there as regularly as possible. Do we have, or can we have, an officer on every street all the time? No, we can't. It just physically isn't feasible. So we do our best to try and maximise our visibility by making sure that people are in the right place at the right time. They have patrol plans that they follow, so they know exactly where they need to be to maximise their time. But it is a difficult, constant battle that we're up against. You're on mute, Councillor Pandon, I think.
Yeah, sorry, another question that's come up, and I think it's quite an important and a good question, not least because there's a lot of false and fake news around that, a lot of perceptions. So the question is, youth crime, gang crime, knife, and all that related stuff. Is there a correlation, is there a link between grooming? And if there is, what's West Yorkshire Police doing about that?
Okay, it depends exactly what they mean by grooming, but from our point of view, grooming can take a number of different forms. There is obviously child sexual exploitation that you probably heard about in the media, which is young people getting groomed for sexually abused, which is obviously abhorrent and a serious problem, certainly historically, but also now. The other type of grooming that we do unfortunately see is called child criminal exploitation, which is more where gangs of criminal are exploiting young people to become involved in activities like drug dealing and other criminal activity. So that is a problem nationally, and obviously Kirklees is no different. We do have dedicated teams at Kirklees to deal with both of those issues. We have a detective inspector who works in partnership with Safer Kirklees, with Children's Social Care, and with a range of other partners to identify children that are vulnerable to exploitation through either of those means, and put as many interventions in place as possible to stop them being drawn into that world. We also work hard to identify the offenders that are responsible for the grooming of children, whether that be sexual or criminal, and again have dedicated teams dealing with those. And I don't need to remind you obviously of the good successes that we have had and continue to have, certainly with historic investigations in that area. Whether there is a link to knife crime, it's a little bit difficult to say. It's probably fair to say that those that are encouraged to drug deal on behalf of gangs may be more susceptible to carry knives, and part of our intervention is obviously to educate the young people around the dangers of such activities.
Thank you. Lee, is there anything you want to add from a council perspective, or do you think Alan's covered most of the stuff?
No, I think Alan's covered most things there. He's covered the partnership angle and that we work together on addressing the issue. So, yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. And another question's come in terms of drug use. Now, this is actually, you know, a lot of live chat going on about this. That there appears to be widespread drug abuse, drug dealing. Can you tell us what the facts are in terms of, is it as widespread as we think it is? Is it normal? Is it below average? And you did mention that our figures have gone down, but what assurances can we give the community that actually there are issues, but is it widespread, or is it a growing problem? Are we on top of it?
Sorry, you broke up at the beginning there, Shabir. Were you just talking about general drug dealing? Is that?
Yeah, there's a perception out there in communities that drug dealing, drug use is widespread, and a lot of the criminal stuff. But you did also say earlier on that generally the crime's going down. So perception might be here, but the crime's actually going down. So focusing on drugs, is it a big problem, and is it getting worse, and is it widespread everywhere?
Okay, but from our point of view, obviously, drug dealing is an issue. Is it widespread? I would say not widespread, in that it is a small number of people that are undertaking this activity. It's not as if every person you see walking around Batley is a drug dealer, but there are definitely small numbers of groups involved in this activity that we are trying to tackle. The recording of drug crimes is a bit of a difficult one, because obviously the more people we catch with drugs, the higher the figures are, but that is a positive thing, really. It doesn't necessarily mean it's widespread. It just means that our policing approach is correct and that we are identifying more drug dealers and stopping them more. So year to date, the number of drugs offences has increased. But I take that as a positive sign. Certainly during the restrictions and COVID, we've had a number of successes around arresting drug dealers, because obviously they have stood out somewhat more with the streets being quieter. So we've stopped a number of vehicles and people and found drugs on them. So it is an issue. I would dispute that it was widespread or that a large portion of the community was involved in it. It's a small number of people that we are working hard to tackle, and we do our utmost with others to do that.
Thank you. While I'll bring Tracy in, and if Gwen and you also want to come in, right? Yeah, I'll bring Tracy in, because I know you've got to go, Tracy. So,
yeah, thank
Tracy,
you so much.
in terms of what you've heard
you.
and what your response is.
I just think it's been an absolutely excellent webinar, and thank you so much for those considered questions as well, because I know everyone is so anxious that's what's going on in our community, and with our young people, we don't want their lives to be ruined or blighted by crime or violence. And my email is tracy.brabin.mp@parliament.uk. If you want to talk to me, if you want to work with me, please do reach out. But thank you to the police and to our councillors, who, remember, they're volunteers and they get a small amount of money for their expenses, but basically they dedicate their life to our community. So thank you all so much for taking part this evening. And I'm so sorry I have to go, but I have another call that I should have had at 7. So thank you for this, and thank you so much, Shabir, for inviting me on. And again, my emails are open and my door's open. Thank you.
Councillor Panda, I'm not sure if you're muted. Okay, so until Shabir comes back, should we pick up on some other questions that have come through? There's been several requests from the chat for extra youth provision and involvement. Yes, I would agree with that, and I think Shabir has highlighted some of those points in terms of the council's response and what the council is doing. I think something from a Safer Kirklees point of view, the Police and Crime Commissioner, he runs numerous grants, including the Safer Communities Funding Grant. I'm aware that in the Batley West area in particular, that there's been no groups that have been funded. That doesn't mean that they haven't applied, but they've not been successful for one reason or another. So certainly for local grassroots organisations that want some additional funding, Safer Kirklees can help with bids into that process moving forward.
Thanks, Lee. Obviously Tracy's gone, but I was saying that thank you, Tracy, for taking the time out and the commitment that you've shown in joining this meeting. Gwen, do you want to come in, reflection, a few words, what you've heard so far before we take some more questions?
Yeah, thanks, Shabir. Obviously, we've covered a lot tonight. Yeah. And again, I just want to say thank you to yourself for organising this meeting. I think it has been excellent, like Tracy said. Obviously, my thanks to Tracy for her answers and her input, to Sergeant Maloney, Alan Travers and Lee Hamilton, and also obviously my ward colleague, Yusra, as well as yourself, Shabir. I've just been scribbling notes down. Obviously, I welcome any investment into Batley West. Batley born and bred and proud. I always harp on about that. But I'm really proud of the investment that we are putting. It has been a very difficult ride over many, many years with all the cutbacks due to central government. So I welcome that, the investment into families, intervention and prevention. Obviously, funding as well to support the groups that's already out there. We've already mentioned the training cave. We've got the wonderful Friends of Wilton Park who work closely, want more activities for young people. And we actually want to encourage other people to help young people as well as we want to help young people. Tracy made a very good point about how difficult it has been for young people in the lockdown. And now that as we try to come out of lockdown, which I hope people will abide still by the safety guidelines that we have to take, that there isn't going to be as much things going on for young people. So we obviously do need to support them. Again, Andy Maloney, thank you for your input as well. And like you say, just going back to the tragic incident of Sunday night, we do need people to continue to report. Please share information, be it on 101 or on the Crime Stoppers or on the online reporting tool as well. And I do welcome Tyre Minster. I really welcome that. I'm getting lots of inquiries, along with councillors saying, about speeding vehicles in the area. I think my road is part of the racetrack that some of these drivers are using. And then just to sum up, we said that we do want people to help report antisocial behaviour. It is partnership working. It's partnership working with ourselves as ward councillors, with the council, with the police and our MP, but also the residents. They play an important part in this partnership for reporting things. CCTV, that is always one that we're asked for. If we could have CCTV cameras, people really probably would feel a lot safer, but there are pluses and negatives on that. I had a lot more I could say, but can I just say thank you again? And thank you to everybody who's input questions. I'm sure there's been a lot more questions that people would like to have asked. I know my phone's been quite busy, and I assume other people's phones have been busy as well. So, but I'd like to think we could possibly arrange another meeting like this. So thanks again, Shabir. It's been very, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you for your input. Excellent stuff. Yusra, do you want to say a few words in terms of what you've heard so far before we take one or two more questions?
Yeah, I'll keep it short because Councillor Gwen has covered most of it. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shabir, for organising this webinar. It is the way forward. And thank you everyone for participating in the webinar with us as councillors. Just touching upon the fantastic news that you've given the residents in terms of the funding coming into Kirklees Council to help the youth moving forward, and also the situation with the COVID coming out of that and employment being low. But as you've highlighted, the many sort of funding avenues that are coming towards us, so watch this space. And also, if anybody, also thanking the residents as well for coming forward with their questions, and I look forward to working together with everyone in order to create a more safer space for us all, and obviously looking forward to making sure that you're happy and proud of the place where you live. Thank you.
Thanks, Yusra. And on that, there's been some text messages and private messages and social media messages that have coming forward in terms of the passion, and it's really good that there's a lot of positive stuff that's coming forward as well, that the communities do want to get involved, they do want to take part, they do want to take ownership of their local assets, and that's something really, really positive, because it's generating, from a local area point of view, it's generating a lot of interest. I understand that people from outside the area, because the purpose of the webinar was as a response of what happened on the weekend, and as leader and also as a local councillor, you know, I had to actually make sure that we actually communicated with the community out there to let them know what we're doing and how we are doing the investigations. There is a line of investigations. The police has already made a lot of inroads in terms of making arrests, but there's a whole process to go through. But that is something that's coming out very, very powerfully, very strongly, that the communities want to work with us, especially around the Chestnuts Park area. Long way to go. A lot of stuff has been done. So on that, Lee, is there anything that we can do to make that happen? I'm not, you know, I don't need specifics, but is there? How can we make that happen? Not just here, but widely.
I think it should be just to reiterate what you've said there, that looking at the comments, there are some frustrations from members of the public, and you know, quite rightly, and I can see that and understand some of that, but there's lots of desire to build on things. So yeah, I agree, we've got to build on that. How we do that? So there are some strong, influential people within the comments that I've seen coming through. We already have engagement with some of these individuals and some of the groups, and we need to pick some of that up moving forward. I think with elected members being at the heart of it, that's key. We've got to have that. And I think quite a lot of it should come through the elected members with Safer Kirklees and the partnership bringing that support and some areas of expertise that is needed. You're muted, Councillor Pandar.
Yeah, another question that's coming through the chat and private message is we had many years ago special constables. Does that scheme still exist? And if it doesn't, can we bring them back in for the police?
Yeah, no, we do have special constables still. Councillor Pandor, probably not changed massively from the scheme your contact will have been familiar with. And I would definitely encourage any local people who've got a passion or an interest in helping out the local community to join us. It's on our West Yorkshire website, the full details. The numbers have reduced probably over the last 5 years. We have seen a lot of our special constables move on to be full-time police officers with the recruitment that we've been doing over the last few years. So there aren't as many around now as there were 5 or 10 years ago, but we are trying to resurrect that and are actively recruiting. So yes, any local members of the public that will be interested in that, please take a look, and we'd love to welcome you on board.
You're muted again.
Another question that's coming is, how can people come forward and make a complaint or bring evidence forward without them being named? Because that's a key issue. Because they want to come forward, they've got evidence, but they're scared on it. And like you get the witness protection program, is there anything similar that we can use at a local level where people's identities is not revealed?
Okay, well, there's a few different angles. Obviously, people can submit information via Crime Stoppers. That is completely anonymous and will be dealt with us by intelligence, and that is obviously one of the things we can act of, particularly in relation to drug dealing. There is, however, a big difference between intelligence and evidence, which is what we need to prosecute people through the courts. Evidence is obviously where people are willing to stand up in front of a judge and jury and swear on an oath as to what they've seen, and it's that evidence that we need to secure before we can convict people at court. Obviously, that cannot normally be case. There are still, on the very, very rare occasions, witness protection schemes. What I would say, Lo, was to encourage people to come forward, is please don't be scared. We will do our utmost to look after you. The threat towards witnesses is extremely, extremely low. I know people are worried, but in my experience, it is very, very rare that there is any kind of retribution towards people that contact the police about matters. We can assist you and put safeguarding measures in place to help make you feel as safe as possible, but please do not let it put you off coming forward to us. It's only with the evidence and information that people provide that we can get these criminals off the street.
You're muted again.
Councillor Pondo, you appear to have...
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Another question coming, and maybe it's one for you, Lee, is regarding the third sector. And the third sector, the voluntary community sector, has done some fantastic work, especially on the back of the pandemic. You know, I see wonderful work going on everywhere across Kirklees, everywhere across the whole country. The way people have got together and actually supported elderly people, supported people who are shielding, taking people's dogs out for walks, and that community camaraderie and that community ownership and partnership is actually coming to itself. So how can we start to provide more support to voluntary community sector to actually carry on the good work and try and help us achieving the big agenda which we're talking about?
Yeah, Shabir, so from a crime and safety point of view, we've already started some work around having a look at those mutual age groups that are out there that have responded so well during COVID-19 and how we can work with them to look at crime and safety and getting them involved in some initiatives. So I've seen quite a few comments on there becoming involved in knife crime initiatives or community safety initiatives. That's something that we're looking to build on in the future, using those networks that have come together so well, and how can we together work together around community safety crime and knife crime. So that's one that is upcoming and for the future, and we're looking to get something out to those mutual age groups in the next few weeks.
Right, thank you. That brings us to the close of tonight's session. It was done very, very quickly. We had to get this webinar up and running very, very quickly because of what's happened in recent times. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank Chief Inspector Alan Travis, who's actually, taken a lot of the questions, and I really appreciate that, and who's worked really hard behind the scenes to actually make this happen. Also, Sergeant Maloney, thank you very much for the time, and thank you for the updates, and we'll look forward to working with you. Also, I'd like to thank Lee Hamilton, our Kirklees Community Safety Manager, who's actually, been working hard as well behind the scenes, and not last but least, my two ward colleagues, Councillor Gwenlow, who has been around with me since I first became a councillor many years ago, and more recently just has joined us. So thank you very much for the time, and also to Tracy, who's had to go, but I appreciate her taking the time out. And actually, this would not have been possible if it wasn't for the audience. I don't know how many people are watching, but I'm assuming that there'll be quite a lot of people who are listening, and also the people who actually put questions in before the meeting, the people who have made comments during the meeting. We will pick single one of them up. I really appreciate that, and we will continue to talk. If you have any issues, you have our details there on the council's website. If you just put a search in for your councillors or your MPs, all the details will come up there. It's not secret regarding, how to contact us. We are public servants, and that's what we will continue to do. So without further ado, thank you very much. I've gone over 1 minute, but good night, and stay safe. Thank you very much.